web series called POV Italian. My name's Scott Mash. Why POV Italian? Well, because I'm going to shoot most of it point of view using a GoPro Hero 3 Plus that my wife got me for Christmas, my beautiful wife Vicky. So I'm going to be using like the hat mount or head mount strap that you can get for your GoPro camera, because I want folks to see from my eyes point of view what it's like to cook. A little bit of information about me. I have no culinary background. I'm an IT guy. My bachelor's and master's degree are both in information technology. No culinary school whatsoever. I've taken a kind of a couple-hour cooking class here and there. About 5 years ago, I started really loving Italian food. Never really liked it prior to that. About 2 years ago, I thought, gee, I'd kind of try to cook Italian and see if I can do it. Prior to that, my cooking experience has been kind of, I always say, functional cooking. I got 3 kids, so it was hamburgers, macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, of course, grilling out. Even on the nights where you're busy, chicken nuggets and French fries. My big cooking events were always Thanksgiving and Christmas, where I do like a turkey and a ham and a few sides and whatnot. But really just took a shot at cooking one day. Absolutely loved it. Now I'm kind of head over heels cooking Italian. I'm crazy about Italian cookbooks. None of these recipes I'm doing are my own. I've gotten them out of one of my favorite cookbooks, and of course I tweak it all a little bit. But thanks so much for checking out Point of View Italian. And today we're going to make Ribollita. Ribollita is, I'm told, means reheated. I don't speak Italian, and it's really just a Tuscan vegetable bread soup. You'll see the ingredients here in a few minutes. The recipe, a lot of the recipes, you'll get the soup already, and then you'll put your bread in it. And of course, it's always better reheated. I don't like mine with the bread in it. I kind of use a crouton. I've got a pretty good crouton recipe that my wife makes a crouton. She's got a really good recipe. I got to give her credit. And she'll make those for the Ribollita, or if I'm running short on time, I'll just go buy a bag of croutons. But I'm going to try to do these weekly. There may be some weeks that I skip just where I get busy with work and I don't have time to cook or edit the video down or whatnot, but I'll do my best to put them out at least every week if I can. But let's get started on Ribollita. We'll see how it goes. I'm making a batch and a half, so some of the ingredients here, I've got a few more out than I would normally use for a single batch. So what I'm using, I have 2 very large leeks, 3 carrots, 3 stalks of celery, 3 zucchini, 2 cans of Cinto white kidney beans or cannellini beans. We're going to use probably a can and a half of peeled tomatoes, but we're going to crush those. We use some crushed red pepper, 3 russet potatoes. The recipe normally calls for a couple cloves of garlic. I like a lot of garlic. We're probably going to use the entire bunch of garlic. Also some kale and red chard. And also for our seasonings, we're going to have bay leaves, some thyme, salt and pepper, and of course with every good Italian recipe you use a good bit of olive oil. So let's start cutting up our ingredients. Okay, so now we're ready to cut up our leeks. What we're going to use here on the leeks is primarily the white part. We'll go up to it starts getting a little bit of green in it. It's important after you're done cutting up your leeks that you rinse them, because you can see here your leeks are kind of grow in layers, and sometimes you get a little bit of grit down in those layers. So we will, after we get these cut up, we're going to use a colander and give them a quick rinse. So on your leeks, of course you're going to discard the bottoms, and we are going to cut them into small pieces like so. Try to get a uniform thickness. As you can see, my knife skills aren't what they need to be quite yet. I'll get rid of some of the outside of this leek because we got a little bit of rotting and don't want to put that into our wonderful soup that we're making here. Get rid of those outside layers. This is a good example. As I said before, you've got to rinse these because you get some grit down in between the layers, and you can see it right here. So we're going to make sure we rinse these thoroughly when we're done. So If you've never used leeks before, which I didn't start using leeks until recently, they almost have an oniony smell. So if you can't find leeks, you're out in the middle of nowhere, you could probably get away with a little bit of red onion. I wouldn't use a lot of it, but you could probably get away with it. So this is how we cut up our leeks. Once we get our leek cut up, just give them a real rough chop. We don't want the little circles in there, so we're just going to give them a rough chop just to kind of cut them in half or quarters or whatnot. Again, this is Ribollita is a nice peasant soup. It's very rustic. So if you have a big piece every now and then, well, it's just like home. So, all right, so next is our garlic. And what we're going to do here is just kind of break it up real quick. I like a lot of garlic. Don't want it to be overpowering, but boy, it adds a lot of flavor. There are probably quicker ways to clean your garlic. Me being kind of a relative newbie, I'm going to show you how I do it. A lot of times I'll take the time to kind of hand peel the garlic. If you give it a little twist like that, you can get the skin off pretty easy. You don't want to twist it so much that you break it, but you can kind of wiggle the skin loose, and you can kind of hear it crack and pop while you're doing it to know that the skin's coming loose. This can take a while to do it this way, but if you're a garlic purist, you don't want to hurt your garlic. The quick and dirty way, use a flat side of your knife, give it a little stomp, and the skin peels off. A lot of folks will tell you that this way, when you do it, it kind of releases the oil too, which you can definitely feel the moisture from the garlic on your hands as they stick to everything. Now you're going to see I've got my leeks clean right here. This Ribollita, this recipe, you kind of start it in different batches. Your leeks go first, and then your carrots and celery. The garlic goes with the leeks, and then your potatoes and whatnot. And so I'm going to put my batches in bowls, so that way, you know, once I start the leeks and I cook them down for about 5 or so minutes, then the next round is the carrots and celery, and the next round is your potatoes and your zucchini and whatnot. But we'll go through all that. I've got my garlic peeled, so we're just going to give it, a medium to fine chop here. Again, my knife skills aren't anything impressive because I haven't been cooking that long. I try, but they're not where I want them to be. Just so you know, or if you're interested, I use the Dexter knives just because that was the first knife I bought, and so I kept buying them. But that's about good enough. This will allow the flavor from the garlic to get through the soup. We're just going to put those right in with our leeks because that's all one batch. That will be the first batch that will go in our soup. Anytime I work with garlic, I like to wash my hands and wash my knives because that garlic oil is sticky. Next thing is our celery and carrots are going to be kind of the second ingredient. So with your celery, we're going to discard the big ends and just kind of top them off here a little bit to where they were dry on top. Push that out of the way. Now on our celery, what I like to do, and again, this is just me, this may or may not be the right way to do it, but this is my way of doing it. I just pretty much split them down the middle, like so. Best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, it's a rustic soup, so chunky can be good. And cut them like so. Alright, so now we have our carrots, which have been peeled by my lovely assistant. Carrot, same thing. We're going to get rid of the tops and the bottoms. I like to do the same thing with my carrots and splitting them. Be a little hairy on some of them. Try not to cut our fingers. Been cut enough. About bit my finger there, so I'm sure somebody out there will comment on this video of how dangerous my cutting style is. and I appreciate those comments when they come in. So, carrots, same thing. We're going to cut them about the same size as our celery. We're going to try our best. Chop, chop, chop. So, I am preparing this soup. It is the Tuesday before Christmas 2015. I'm going to preparing soup to take into the office tomorrow for us lucky folks who decided to work on Christmas Eve. I have more than enough vacation to take off, but behind on projects, so I thought, what the heck, I'll just go ahead and go in. Alright, so the carrots and celery are now cut up. Discard our ends. So those go into a bowl because these are going to be the second items that we drop in and cook for a little bit before we call it a soup. Push the rest of this out of the way. Next are the zucchini and the potatoes. Now with this, we are going to skin the potatoes. We're going to leave the skins on the zucchini. These are relatively young zucchini. The skins are pretty thin, so we're just going to give them a quick rinse and then chop them up. Alright, so now we're ready to cut up our zucchini. Again, tops and bottoms go away. Want to cut them in half best we can. Then we are going to cut them down into quarters. Probably going to slice them. Again, we've can't say this enough. It's a nice rustic soup. So you're going to have, you try to keep your vegetables as close as you can to the same size so everything kind of cooks evenly. This soup cooks long enough to where everything's going to cook through. The great thing about having dogs is when those pieces that just hit the floor, they'll run over and pick them up. And then we'll find them on the couch later in the evening where they didn't eat them. So again, let's do our next. I'm hearing snickers from my wife who's over there helping me out. She's peeling the potatoes. Boy, I did a lousy job cutting that zucchini. You know, and I'm not going to edit out when I make mistakes or I miscut something because this is the way I cook. It is what it is. And the reason I like cooking Italian food, if you talk to anybody that's Italian, which I don't have a drop of Italian blood in me, and you say, I want that recipe, good luck. Because one thing I've learned about Italians, from my few Italian friends and family that I do have, they don't write recipes down. You cook by feel if you're Italian or if you cook Italian. So you'll hear me say, just pour some olive oil in there. And I always tell folks, I jokingly tell my wife and kids, you just put in enough to where it feels right. And you're going to screw it up. I still screw it up. Like I said, I've only been cooking for a couple of years. No culinary background whatsoever, an IT geek. So you just got to go with what your gut says. Alright, so now we've got our potatoes. These potatoes are not boiled, they're not blanched, they're just peeled and rinsed. Same thing. Now your potatoes and carrots are probably the two, being root vegetables, that you want to cut just a little bit smaller than the other items, just because they take a little bit longer to cook. So that's about the size that I like them. Again, you got to cook what you like. You got to cook by feel. And you got to screw it up and learn. Yeah, I know. Pathetic knife skills. If this were a computer instead of a knife, I'd have it mastered. But it's scary and it's sharp. you'll notice that I never drag my blade across the wood. That's mainly because I don't know how to sharpen knives really well. And I'm scared of dulling them, so that when I do have to sharpen them, it's an experience. So anytime I scrape across the wood, you'll see people on TV that they'll just kind of scrape at the edge of the knife. I'm like, that's probably going to dull it. Of course, they probably know how in the hell to sharpen these things. All right, the last of our ingredients is kale and red chard. Now, you can use pretty much any green. I've used black kale, I've used Savoy cabbage, I've used Swiss chard. The grocery store had regular old kale, curly kale, and red chard. That's what we're using. Now, to do this, again, there's better ways to do it. I see folks pull from the bottom of the kale. I just rip them off in chunks. You're going to want chunks about yay size. I mean, once you wilt this down, it's going to be almost nothing anyway. So our goal is just to rip off chunks off of this hard center core. Again, it's no scientific size, just rip it off in chunks. Every now and then you might have a branch that's got the hard center. I tend to keep those out. It probably would soften down, but you know, better safe than sorry. So same thing with your red chard. This chard is got some spots in it that are not so good. Not a good day for kale at the grocery store, or chard, I'm sorry. We just rip it up. Same thing, about the same size chunks. This is going to cook down real small anyway. I'm doing this in a colander because I'm going to give it a quick rinse once I'm done prepping. Okay, our last ingredients we have to get ready are our cannelli beans and our peeled tomatoes. I really like the Cento San Marzano peeled tomatoes. Anytime I cook, I try to use these. Cento also has a good cannelli bean. Now what we are going to do is we're going to drain off the liquid and give them a quick rinse to get rid of this nasty goo that they put them in. We're also going to take half of one of the cans and we're going to kind of puree them up or smash them up because they're going to serve as kind of a thickening agent for our soup once we get it rolling. So again, this is rustic, so these peeled tomatoes, I'm just going to crush them up by hand when I pour them into the pot. Rustic meaning too lazy to cut everything uniform and make it look nice. So let's get rolling. We got everything ready. All right, I'm going to start getting my oil hot. I like to use a good Italian olive oil. You'll hear folks say, oh, the Greek's better, all the Italians are better. I like Italian olive oil. I buy it by the big metal can. And it usually doesn't last me very long because I put olive oil in everything. I'll let my oil heat up. You'll see my crappy little kitchen with my little electric stove, which I don't like and wish I had gas, but I have what I have, so we're going to make do. This pot may not be big enough. Like I said, I'm making a batch and a half, and generally a batch goes about 3/4. So I've got a backup pan just in case it will make half the soup in if we have to. So got it cranked just to get my oil hot. Leeks and garlic are going to go in first. We're going to cook them over about medium heat for about 5 minutes till the leeks start to get a little brown, start to get a little more transparent. Again, they kind of almost got a light oniony smell. So if you can't find leeks, use a little bit of onion, red onion, and you'll make do. You can see I've got my garlic here on top. Oil's getting hot. Nice sizzle. Nice sizzle. Now that it's getting hot, turn my heat down. You'll see me every now and then grab the olive oil as we go through this process and give it another shot, just because it starts to look like it's getting a little dry. And so again, cook by feel. My gut tells me add more olive oil. I add more olive oil. So let that go for about 5 minutes. The leeks are pretty much where they need to be. You can see they are getting a little transparent. Turn our heat up just a little bit. So next go the carrots and the celery. Now these are going to cook together now about 8 minutes. Let's get these all mixed up in there. Set our trusty timer for a man with no sense of time. 8 minutes, and we're off to the races. All right, remember I said I get a gut feeling every now and then I'd smell olive oil, so we're adding olive oil. So we'll just stir occasionally. There's nothing better than the smell of a cooking sofrito, and you'll probably hear me say that on every video because a lot of the stuff I make starts with like a sofrito base. So, a couple minutes, we're going to be throwing in our potatoes and zucchini. Okay, potatoes and zucchini. And I can tell you that this pan is probably not going to be big enough once we get everything in there, but that's alright. I have a backup. We're going to go ahead and stir this all together and put 8 more minutes on the clock. Again, my gut tells me, hey, add olive oil. Then my gut's also telling me that's a great big piece of zucchini, which is now cut up. Olive oil out of the way. Stir this up just a little bit more. 8 minutes on the clock. Now, I would not be truthful if I said that this recipe was my own. This one is coming out of one of my favorite cookbooks, How to Italy. Now, I change the every time I see a recipe, I kind of cook it once by the book, and then I modify it a little bit. But this is a great book, highly recommended. So, still waiting. We've got a few minutes left on our potatoes and our zucchini. Okay, it's time to add our greens, and you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, all those greens aren't going to fit in there. But those of you who know a little more about cooking know that these things cook down to darn near nothing. Got a few bigger pieces here. I am just going to go kind of break up the bigger pieces from where I was in a rush. Once we get our greens in, we're looking at about another 8 minutes of cook time for these to sweat down to the size and tenderness that we want them. See, we're going to stir some of these in here. Kind of get them down close to that heat. Once I get them all in here, we're going to put the lid on so they'll sweat down real quick. Again, if I see big pieces, my hands are clean. If I see bigger pieces, I am going to go ahead and tear them up because I was in a hurry to try to get this going. I'm making a mess now. So let's just get the rest of this in here. Squash it down, as they say here in Appalachia. Well, I guess I'm not in Appalachia anymore. And I'm just making a mess. Let's put the lid on. Start our timer. We'll go 8 minutes. Probably let them go a little longer than that so I can get them all in there. So we'll let these steam for just a second. I'll stir. They'll be cooking down. So, alright, as you can see, our greens are starting to cook down. I'm going to keep the lid on them just for a little bit longer, so they will steam right down to next to nothing. Ideally, you'd want a bigger pan. I don't have a bigger pan, and if I make just a regular serving or a regular pot of this Ribollita, it fits, but since I'm doing kind of a recipe and a half, it's going to be really, really tight, but we're going to make do. So, about 3 minutes left on the greens, and then we will be putting in our tomatoes, which we'll break up by hand as we pour them in. A little bit of water, the cannelli beans, and then our seasoning. Before I put in the tomatoes here in just about 3 minutes, I'm going to add the red pepper flake as well. And again, it's just by feel how much red pepper flake you like. If you like it a little spicy, a little bit more. If you don't, a little less. You can always add more, but you can't take away. Alright, it has now been 8 minutes since we put our kale on, so I'm going to put some red pepper flake in and stir this in. I'm going to go with about a yay. Again, I don't measure. That's why I like Italian cooking. I'm not a very good baker, because you just gotta, it's too scientific, you gotta measure stuff too much. Not to say I can't bake, I baked some stuff before, but I'd rather cook than bake. Alright, so what we're going to do, our tomatoes, we're just going to, the sauce, we're just going to pour in. As we get our tomatoes, we're just going to break them up by hand. Be careful, if you squeeze these little suckers, sometimes they will squirt all over you. The trick is to put your thumb in them so that they don't squirt, nice and easy. Again, just trying to break them up a little bit. We do have to add water to this. I just used my tomato can and just add a little water to it, so that way I'm getting getting to use all my tomato juice. Now these Cento San Marzella tomatoes do have some basil in them. This can, it just happened to be floating on top when I opened the can, and so I discard that. I imagine there are some folks out there that use it. I just don't. If I'm going to use basil, I'll put in some fresh basil. So pouring our soup. We're going to get a little bit of water in this can. This recipe, again, it calls for water. Sorry about the dirty dishes in the sink. I'm doing this after getting home from work and didn't have enough time really to do dishes before getting started. Alright, so now water in. Now since I'm doing 1.5, the normal recipe calls for 1. I'm going to go ahead and do a second can of tomatoes. Again, because my gut says so. Yes, I have an electric can opener. It does not like me, so I try not to use it. Sometimes my wife comes in and does this for me because I get angry at our opener and I say words I shouldn't be saying. So I'm going to pull my lid over here so I can discard my basil when I come across it. With our cannelli beans, if you remember back, I said we're going to take about a half of a can and puree them or smash them. I just used a wooden spoon and smash those. They're going to serve as a thickening agent. They'll look kind of clumpy when we first put them in. They'll break up. So now we have all of our ingredients minus all the seasonings that we're going to want. Quick stir. Break up that clump there a little bit. Hear my son in the background. He's going to stay all night with a friend. He's trying to avoid being on camera, but I don't know if that's all it's going to work for him. So now we have pretty much all of our ingredients in our soup. Time to season. Bay leaves. Count your bay leaves. You do not want to leave your bay leaves in the soup. These are getting a little bit on the old side. They're going to work though for us. I like to use a little bit of a fresher bay leaf. Oh, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll go 6, 7 bay leaves just because they're a little smaller, a little drier, so they may not have the oil in them that they really need. I am out of thyme. I didn't have any fresh thyme. I don't use thyme a lot. I don't have any thyme dry seasoning. My wife just happened to be going to Walmart, so she's going to bring some back. Now, salt. As I shared before, I used to be scared of salt. Now my rule of thumb is, when you think you have enough salt, add a little more. I use kosher salt, coarse kosher salt. I heard on a cooking program, which I watch the cooking TV, and the Food Network religiously, pretty much every night. And, you know, they talked about the different kinds of salt. And, of course, when you're seasoning meat, iodized salt will dry out your meat. So they say use kosher salt. Well, no, I just use kosher salt and everything. So I probably don't have enough salt in there yet. I'm going to add a little bit more. I'll be adding more as the night goes on. Time to add pepper. Same thing. Don't be scared of pepper, because this only has really 5 seasonings. It's got your red pepper, your salt, your black pepper, and thyme. that's really it, other than, you know, the sofritos and all the veggies. Now, we're going to let this cook. Recipe says a half hour. Since I've got a big batch here and it's going to take a while to really get simmering, I'm going to let mine go for 45 minutes. So it's about 8 o'clock in the evening now. So, at about 8:45, probably about 8:30, I'll start tasting it to make sure that the flavor is where I want it seasoning-wise. But I'll guarantee you that I'll be adding more seasoning. Sometimes I get the feeling like it needs something else after I've got it all seasoned. I've been known to throw a little bit of basil in here. A little bit of Italian seasoning even, which of course contains basil. We're pretty much good right there. Now I'm going to let it kind of start simmering, and then I'm going to lower my heat. So let this cook, simmer, low simmer, a nice low simmer, 45 minutes. Those cannelli beans will break up, everything will be tender, it'll be a great, wonderful soup. Kind of move the camera a little closer so maybe you can get a little smell-o-vision. I think this lens might be steaming up a little bit. So we've got a few minutes left still on the soup. You guys can see here I've kind of fished out my bay leaves while I've been stirring. Soup looks good. Okay, so we have our time. My beautiful wife has saved the day. So we're going to hit this. Again, it's going to seem like I'm putting a lot of time in here, but this is a lot of soup. And it was missing something. And I'm hoping that this is what it was missing. Okay, we got our beautiful thyme in there. We're going to stir it in. Alright, we've done the final tasting of the soup. It is good. I put just a little bit more salt in it. Bay leaf was trying to make its way back in. I've turned the heat off. Ah, there's another bay leaf. See, those things hide on you. So I'm going to let this just cool for a few minutes in this big pan. Then I'm going to put it in some smaller, or separate it into 2 more pans. Let it cool a little further until it's near room temperature, and then I'll put it in a refrigerator. Never put hot food in a refrigerator, especially a big pan like this, because it will not get cold, and you're going to introduce bacteria, and everybody's going to be sick that eats your cooking. Man, that smells good. So that, my friends, is Ribollita. So leave your comments down below the video. If you have questions, feel free to email. You should be able to find the email address and everything on our channel, POV Italian. And thanks for watching.